The key turned with a clean click. I stepped inside and felt the stillness breathe around me, unfurnished walls, scuffed hardwood floors, and sunlight stretching long across the hallway. It smelled faintly of dust and pine cleaner, not luxury, not permanence. But it was mine. I had signed the lease 3 days ago, paid the deposit in full, and hauled everything I owned in 2 carloads. A futon, a small dining table, 4 mismatched plates, and a thrifted lamp with a crooked shade. No one helped me move. I hadn't asked. I was setting down a box of utensils when I heard the engines. 2 vehicles pulled up. First, my dad's black SUV. Then Callie's minivan, sagging slightly under the weight of car seats and plastic bags. Doors opened like an unfolding threat. My father first arms crossed Callie behind him, wrangling her twins, and Jeremy shuffling out last with a diaper bag. No one had texted. No one had called. But they were here on my sidewalk like this was a planned delivery. I didn't open the door right away. When I finally did, my dad didn't say hello. He looked behind me, past me, into the apartment like appraising a hotel suite. His brow creased. "Where are we supposed to sleep?" Callie hovered behind him, biting her lip. One of the kids asked if there was a bunk bed. I kept my hand on the knob. "You're not." He squinted. "What, you're not sleeping here?" I said clearly. "This place isn't for you." My dad's expression didn't change. It hardened. "You're saying we came all this way for nothing. I didn't ask you to come." Callie stepped forward, voice brittle. "The kids were so excited, Sarah. They picked out spots for their sleeping bags." "I understand," I said. "But this is my apartment. It's not a family space. It never was." There was a pause, long, heavy, the kind that used to scare me into backing down, but not this time. I stood in that doorway, feet planted. And then, without raising my voice, I added, "You don't live here. You don't sleep here. You don't decide this time." I closed the door. Not with force, but finality. Behind it, for the first time in years, I exhaled without guilt. I used to think it was normal to pack up your things every time company came. In our old house in Spokane, my room doubled as a guest space storage overflow, or on some weekends, a quiet room for Callie's babies to nap. I learned early how to make myself small, how to roll up my mattress pad and tuck it behind the laundry shelf without making noise. I slept on the living room carpet more times than I can count. My dad said it built character. My mom said I was the easy one. Callie was never asked to move. She was younger by 3 years, but you wouldn't have known it by the way our parents orbited her. Every need was urgent. Every setback was a crisis. If she cried, the whole house hushed. If I succeeded, the house kept chewing. I remember once 7th grade, I won 2nd place in the regional science fair. I came home carrying a certificate and a $75 bookstore gift card. My dad barely looked up from his football game. Callie had a sore throat that day, and the mood in the house was delicate. Later that night, I overheard Mom whispering Callie's just more sensitive. Sarah doesn't need all that fuss, so I stopped expecting the fuss. I learned to celebrate alone, quietly, in the back row, with a kind of dignity no one else seemed to recognize. I worked through high school bagging groceries after class, not because I had to, but because I wanted to save for college. I opened a separate account at a credit union and labeled it UO Fund for University of Oregon. Every time I skipped a coffee or took an extra shift, I imagined my future in a city where no one would ask me to give up my bed. When the acceptance letter came, I held it in shaking hands. Interior design, full admission. I told Mom, who was stirring something on the stove, and she said, "Oh, that's cute. But Callie's going through a tough time right now. Can you help her find a daycare this weekend?" I nodded. "Of course." 2 months before my move, I called the bank to confirm my account balance. The woman on the line cleared her throat awkwardly and said, "It was withdrawn last week, all of it." Signed by a joint account holder, Marion Alden. The air went out of me. When I asked my mother, she sounded annoyed. Callie's lease fell through. She and the baby had nowhere to go. "You're still going to school, aren't you?" I was. But I took out a loan with interest that same week and never mentioned it again. In their eyes, I had a future. Callie had emergencies, and I was the bridge between them, always bending, always giving, until one day I didn't. College didn't break me, but it tried. I learned how to make one pack of ramen last 2 meals, sometimes 3 if I skipped the flavor packet and added hot sauce from the campus cafe. I worked mornings at the library stamping return dates and fixing the broken spine of donated books. At night, I packed floral centerpieces at a shop 2 bus routes away. By the time I crawled into bed, it wasn't sleep I craved, it was stillness. The kind where no one asked me for anything. My professor said I was precise, disciplined, a natural. I said thank you and smiled, then ran spreadsheets until midnight trying to stretch $32 across 5 days. Callie, meanwhile, was back in Spokane posting pictures of latte art and baby milestones. She'd dropped out of her nursing program midway through her 2nd year, too much stress, she said, but still managed to land a part-time admin job at a clinic through one of Dad's old contacts. For her 24th birthday, my parents surprised her with a used Toyota Corolla. It's time she had some independence, Mom said. I got the news via group text. The same week, I walked 4 miles in the rain to avoid another overdraft fee on my transit card. I didn't complain, not out loud. I told myself it was fine, temporary, character building. But then came the message that knocked something loose. I had just submitted my final project for Studio Design 3. It was 2 in the morning, and I was sitting on the back stairwell outside my apartment, cooling off from a panic attack I hadn't named yet. My phone buzzed. Mom. We covered Callie's daycare this month. Used that savings account you never touch. Figured you wouldn't mind. There was no question, no heads up, just assumption. My emergency fund, built from canceled haircuts, skipped lunches, and missed outings gone. Just like that. I stared at the message until my vision blurred. No tears. Just a slow, suffocating pressure pressing down on my chest like a weight I wasn't allowed to acknowledge. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Instead, I curled up on the stairwell with my knees pulled to my chest and let the quiet swallow me. They didn't hate me. That was the hardest part. They loved me, I think, in the way people love tools. Useful, durable, built to carry weight. And I had carried it. For years, I convinced myself it was noble. That I was the strong one. That maybe love looked different when it was quiet, when it didn't come with praise or protection. But in that stairwell beneath the buzzing hallway light, I finally let myself wonder, what if it was never love at all? That night I started looking for internships in other cities. I toured 23 units before I said yes. Some were too dim, too cold, too much carpet. Others came with peeling cabinets or landlords who smiled too quickly. But then I stepped into the 1-bedroom on Lincoln Street, a 2nd-floor walk-up with sunlight pooling on the floor like it had been waiting for me. It smelled faintly of citrus and old paint. The windows opened easily. There was a heater that ticked when it warmed up and a creaky floorboard just past the kitchen archway. It wasn't beautiful, but it felt honest. I didn't need a dream home. I needed enough space to exhale. The lease was straightforward. I read every line twice, signed in blue ink, and transferred the deposit from my home fund spreadsheet with a steady hand. When the keys dropped into my palm, it felt like being handed permission. I moved in slowly. No trucks, no help. Just a rolling suitcase and 2 borrowed plastic bins. I brought in my books first, then my plants, then a folding chair. I placed everything with intention, even the silence. For 2 weeks, I told no one. I walked to work, brewed coffee in the mornings, watched light shift across the walls in the evening. I wasn't hiding, it just hadn't occurred to me that I needed to explain. Then, one Saturday, I sent a text to the family group chat. Saturday at 3, come see my place. The response was immediate. Callie. Are we bringing an air mattress or are there enough beds, Mom? How exciting, we'll grab lunch on the way. The kids are thrilled. Dad, send the lease papers. I want to take a look before we move forward. I stared at the screen. I hadn't said we. I hadn't offered anything beyond a glimpse, but their assumptions slid in easily like a hand into an old glove. Of course I'd made space for them. Of course they'd already packed. I closed my phone and placed it upside down on the counter. That evening, I opened every window and let the air in until the whole apartment smelled like rosemary and something sharp, something clean. I stood in the center of the room barefoot listening to the walls breathe. If I'd said nothing, they might have stayed away. If I'd said more, they might have asked permission. But silence, I was learning, didn't protect you. Sometimes it just gave other people more room to assume you'd never say no. I poured a glass of water, sat in my folding chair, and waited for the knock I already knew was coming. They arrived at 2:04 p.m., just late enough to feel intentional. Dad walked in first without knocking, brushing past me like he was inspecting a property he'd already closed on. Callie followed, balancing a diaper bag and a tote filled with coloring books. Jeremy lingered outside, and the kids poured in like it was their new playground, jumping from one corner of the living room to the other, yelling about who got the window side. I said nothing. Just moved to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and waited. Callie set a manila folder on the table. "We wanted to show you this in person," she said. Her voice was light, practiced. "It'll make more sense once you see it." Dad opened the folder with a tap of his knuckle like it was a poker hand he knew would win. Inside, mortgage documents, property listings, a color printout of a large house with a wraparound porch and 5 bedrooms. One of the pages had notes scribbled on it. Callie and Jeremy master suite. Kids upstairs. Sarah office, our guest room. This is the one Dad said. North Ridge. New development. Just minutes from Callie's work and a great school district. "I didn't agree to this," I said quietly. He looked up, eyes sharp. "You didn't say no." "I didn't say yes either." Callie leaned in. "We already put down $2,000 to hold it. Through Mom's account. The bank just needs a primary borrower. Your credit's the cleanest." I stared at her. "So you planned a family mortgage using my name?" "I'll contribute what I can," she offered too quickly. "Maybe $300-400 a month. Once Jeremy picks up more shifts." Dad crossed his arms. "You live alone. No dependents. This is a chance to build something together." I didn't raise my voice. "I've been building something. Alone." He slammed his hand on the table. "Where are we supposed to sleep?" Then I stood up. "You don't. Not here." The room stilled. Even the children quieted. I gathered the folder, closed it, and placed it back in front of them. "If you want the house, buy it yourselves. But not with my name." Callie's face crumpled. Dad turned red. Jeremy finally stepped inside, but said nothing. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. Instead, I walked to the door, opened it, and waited. One by one, they filed out. No one said goodbye. The first message came at 1:13 a.m. "Callie, you didn't have to embarrass us like that. The kids didn't understand." I didn't respond. By morning, another followed. "Dad, you're not family anymore. Don't come crawling back when you realize what you've done." That one made me pause, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. I looked at the words for a long time, waiting for the familiar ache, the panic. Nothing came. Later that afternoon, my phone lit up with a call from Mom. I let it ring out the first time. She tried again 10 minutes later, then again. On the 4th, I answered. Her voice was trembling the way it always did when she was just upset enough to seem fragile, but not enough to be kind. "Sarah, your sister's devastated. Your father's blood pressure is up. Do you know what this is doing to our family?" I sat on the floor beside my bookshelf, her voice tinny in my ear. "You're tearing us apart over a few pieces of paper. You could have just signed and figured the rest out later." "We always figure it out." "Not this time," I said. My voice was steady. "Calm." She sniffled. "I don't know what happened to you. You used to be so thoughtful." "I'm still thoughtful," I said. "Just not for people who only think of me when they need something." She went quiet. Then the line disconnected. I put the phone face down, stood up, and walked to the hardware store. $38 later, I returned with a new deadbolt and installed it myself. That night, I ordered Thai takeout yellow curry and jasmine rice and ate it sitting cross-legged on my living room floor. I didn't scroll. I didn't reply. Instead, I watched the streetlights blink on outside and felt the weight in my chest shift, not vanish, just rearrange itself into something manageable, familiar. I wasn't relieved. I wasn't vindicated. But for the first time after one of their storms, I wasn't crumbling. I was intact. And I wasn't going anywhere. It had been nearly 4 months since the folder hit my table and they walked out without looking back. I hadn't blocked anyone. I just stopped reaching out. Then, one evening, just as the light was dipping past the window ledge, my phone buzzed. Callie, I get it now. I'm sorry. No preamble, no questions, just that. A second later, another message arrived, a photo of Mason and Lila sitting cross-legged on a blanket paper crowns on their heads, the baby asleep in Callie's lap. The room around them was cramped and dim, but there was warmth in it. Bare walls, mismatched mugs, a single bulb casting soft light. Real. Unstaged. We're in a rental for now, she wrote. It's small but peaceful. I stared at the photo longer than I expected to. Not because of the kids, but because of her. There was something in her face, exhaustion, yes, but also a kind of clarity. Like she'd stopped performing. 2 days later, she stood at my front door with a backpack, a car seat, and a quiet smile. She didn't bring an apology wrapped in ribbon. She didn't expect a tour. She just asked if we could sit. We talked on the porch while the kids chased shadows in the yard. Nothing deep, just how hard it is to buy groceries with rising prices. How daycare wait lists are a joke. She told me she was doing virtual admin work now. I nodded, handed her a glass of water. She didn't fill the silence, and I didn't force it. We weren't rivals anymore. Just two women who had carried too much for too long. She didn't ask me to forget anything. I didn't need her to bleed. When Miss Dorsey from downstairs brought up a tin of cookies, that evening she handed it to me, glanced at Callie through the screen door, and said, "You look lighter with them here." After dinner, the kids fell asleep in a pile of blankets in the corner of the living room. Callie sat beside me with a mug of tea. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The next morning, they were still there. I repainted the living room a soft gray, the kind that shifts with the light. I did it slowly over a weekend, one wall at a time, a podcast humming in the background. When it dried, I stood back and felt something settle, a quiet that didn't need to be earned. The mint on the windowsill had finally taken. I clipped a few sprigs and tucked them into a jar by the sink. Every time I passed, the scent reminded me I had planted something and it hadn't died. My mom came by once in early spring. She stood at the door with a store-bought coffee cake and eyes that didn't carry fire or frost. "I'm not here to fix anything," she said. "I just thought you might let me sit for a while." I did. She complimented the curtains, asked about work. She didn't mention Callie, didn't bring up the house. When she left, she didn't say, "You should visit." She said, "I'm trying." And I believed her. A week later, I hosted dinner on the patio. Callie brought chicken and a bottle of ginger ale. The kids drew chalk rainbows on the concrete. Miss Dorsey arrived with pickled green beans and her usual commentary on city construction. I invited Jules, a co-worker who once gave me a ride home in the rain and never asked why I was crying in the passenger seat. We ate off mismatched plates. Someone spilled juice. Laughter rose, not loud, but easy. When the sun dipped, I passed around folded blankets. I didn't hover. I didn't explain anything. I just let it be. That night, as I rinsed dishes and heard Mason giggling from the next room, I caught myself saying it aloud for the first time. I'm glad they're here. I'm glad they're home. And I meant it. Not because they needed me. Not because I was making space. But because I hadn't needed to shrink to let them in.